Barry Feely is my name. I'm here in the US at the Great Famine Roadshow. It's just incredible, all the information that has been deciphered here today from experts, and it's incredible that it's all on the Irish famine. In 2016 I was on the Shannon in our annual boat trip, and I pulled into Port Umna port, and from there we went in to see the Workhouse Museum, and I was really inspired by it. I thought it was fantastic. And then I said to myself, my God, we had a workhouse in Boyle, but nobody knows anything about it. So I said, that's my next project. I knew just that there was a workhouse, but there isn't a stone upon stone of it now. So I set about investigating the workhouse. I always put great store in talking to local people, old people, and there was one man in particular, Paddy Toolin. He was 94, and he had a wonderful memory because he visited the rambling houses. There was a rambling house near him, and he visited practically every night. So he had the stories of his previous generation. So I had talked at length to him, and he gave me leads on different subjects. And one lead he gave me was flax, that flax was growing in Boyle. I never heard that. And when I followed it up, I discovered it was. And it was a very labor-intensive crop to grow. And I discovered that it was, when it was saved and cured, it was used for making linen. And I discovered that there was quite an industry around Boyle, but particularly in the workhouse, because it suited the young girls in the workhouse. They were able to spin the cotton yarn or the flax yarn on their spinning wheels, and then they made all their garments. And 52 of them went to Australia in 1850 and 1851, and they made all their own garments. So can you imagine the excitement of that, making their own garments and making lovely clothes for themselves that they never thought they would have. So I am a stonecutter and carver all my life. So I was particularly interested in the building of the workhouse and how it was built. So I made investigations, and I discovered where the stone was quarried. And then it was quarried about 2 miles outside Boyle, and it was brought by cart to the workhouse site. So then you had the stone masons. They were the people that actually built the stone. You had the labourers who served them and brought the stone up on the scaffolding to them, and then you had the stone cutters. Now there was always a bit of friction between the stone cutters and the builders, because the stone cutters had to do all that lovely work around the doors and the windows and the jambs and all the coins and all that fancy work. So they would never sacrifice time for their skill and perfection. So they just wanted to do it right. So they were often behind, waiting for the mason, waiting for the stone cutter to give him some stone. It was all limestone, of course, and I examined in Port Umna, I examined the stonework, and particularly the stairs. It was a winding stairs, which is quite difficult to make, cantilever stairs, and it was perfect. The joints were only about 3 mil. It was just brilliant. I couldn't figure it out how they were so good. Their square chiseling on the stone was brilliant. But it's still a puzzle to me how they built the workhouse in Boyle to serve 700 people. I'm not sure how many square meters, but it's a huge building, the biggest building in Boyle. And it's still a bit of a puzzle to me how they built it in a 2-year period. The man that built it was a man called Jackson, but it's just the logistics and the organising of the whole structure. I feel that they must have brought in some stonemasons or managers from England, because they had previously built the workhouses there, so they would have had a lot of experience. I just have a notion that they may have brought in skilled people to work out the logistics of the whole thing. So I followed up a lot of it, and I talked to more people, and I discovered that there was still a lingering of prejudice against the workhouse. There was one man I called to, and he was in his 80s, and I asked him, did he, that I was investigating the workhouse, did he know anything about it? I know, he says, no, that's way beyond my time now. So it's a small little cottage in the range, and the missus asked me would I have a cup of tea, and I said I would. So I had a cup of tea, and we were chatting generally, and then he said to me, he said, I lived in the workhouse one time. God, says I, how was that? Well, he says there was rooms up overhead over the workhouse itself. In 1943 was demolished, maybe 3/4 of it, but the back wing of it was left, and it became the district hospital. So they had men's and women's ward there, and at a later stage they had a TB ward there, an isolation ward for TB. So yeah, he said we had rooms up overhead, and there were 3 or 4 other families. At that stage the workhouses were being run by the county council, and he said we were there for a number of years, and he was able to tell me the other people and their lifestyle there, and that was great. And about a week later anyhow, I got a phone call from him, and he said don't mention my name when you're talking about the workhouse. He says the children wouldn't like it to be said that we lived in the workhouse. So that was evident. And then there was another story. The present, it was the house that was built for the dispensary doctor, and it was a nice 2-story house built by the county council, and a family came to live in it called Fallon's. And there were 2 characters across the road that had a pub, Maud and Alice. And when they came, Alice left a box of vegetables across the road at their front door, and that was an old sign of welcome. So when eventually the Fallons found out who left it, and when Mary got her feet anyhow and got the house settled, she started up her little garden, and she planted some strawberries. Now she says to herself, the first punnet of strawberries I pick, I'm going to bring them over to Maud and Alice. So she picked a punnet of strawberries anyhow, and she brought them over to Maud and Alice. Walked into the kitchen, and she said, Maud, I picked these from my own garden. Oh, God bless this child, she says, take them away. I wouldn't touch anything that came out of the workhouse ground. So that was another typical story. But I suppose to go back to my lifestyle, as I said, I'm a stonecutter and carver all my life, the 9th generation in my family. So we brought stone. When I started by hand. So at that time we were bringing stone, very rough stone from Partry with no face cut on it, and we had to dress it and work it all by hand. And I also had to be, as all stonecutters, also had to have a knowledge of blacksmith, because we had to sharpen and temper our own tools. So when I left school, I was dyslexic. So I didn't discover that for years afterwards. Of course, I just put it down to, and everybody else put it down to being stupid. But once I got working in stone, I found myself through my hands, and I discovered I was useful. And once I discovered I was useful, I went back to that, I got my confidence, and I went back to that puzzle of a page and slowly began to read it. And I have read a lot since, and it's a great sense of satisfaction and probably pride to me now that I have written 6 books in the last 10 years. Since I retired as a stonecutter I have swapped my chisel for my pen.